Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with Edwin Smith. Edwin, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, James. Happy to be here.
Excited. So Edwin is founder and CEO of The Social Sandwich, which is leading the strategy, content, creating and scheduling social media best practices across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and other social channels. Prior to starting The Social Sandwich, Edwin was senior social media and YouTube producer on The Voice Australia. He was also senior social producer at Network 10 for many years and led the strategy across a whole wide range of shows there, including Survivor, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, along with a lot of the Channel 10 sport products. So today we're going to be discussing video content across TikTok, Reels, YouTube, and more. Edwin, I thought a good place to start would just be to talk about, I guess, the landscape as we are in 2024. Like what does the landscape look like for organic video at the moment, particularly as it relates to businesses and brands?
Yeah, I think we're in a really interesting phase for businesses and for organic content where, across the board on every platform, what happens every year, right, is that organic reach gets lower. Like, if you plotted a graph of average reach across the board for every business, since, the algorithm was invented, back in, 10 years ago, it's basically every year it gets lower. And I think, a lot of factors that come into that, those platforms are trying to make money from us. So they're trying to make us spend money on ads, but there's also just more people posting content. So there's less, eyeballs that we can get in front of because there's more content than ever. And I think in particular, the last, couple of years with the introduction of Reels, with the explosion of TikTok, it's definitely gotten, I think harder in terms of organic reach. And it's not as simple as just posting content and your audience will see that content, because we're fighting with brands and influencers and creators and everyone for the attention. So I think what we're seeing now is brands have to work a bit harder to get that reach. It's more unpredictable as well. There's more, more variance between a good post and a bad post, I'm seeing. It's a really interesting time. I think, that sounds really negative and like doom and gloom, but for me, I kind of look at it as a positive where it gives brands, I think, a chance to, jump in on short form videos to create content that, is a bit more entertaining, because I think now more than ever, social media is an entertainment platform. It's not just a place to go and, catch up with your family and friends, see what a couple of your brands are up to that you might have happened to follow. But there's also now, through Reels, through TikTok, right? Like the discoverability is also bigger than ever. Like there's that chance of getting in front of people that might not know about your brand, that might not have heard of you before. So for me, that's the exciting part, where it's like, if you get the content piece right, you can grow quicker than probably ever, because you're not relying on, hashtags on Instagram or shares or just word of mouth for people to come across your account. If you make a good post and a good video, then those platforms are pretty good at showing those videos to more people. So kind of there's a negative spin you can put on it, but I like to put a positive spin on the landscape that we're at in the moment.
It's a really good perspective. I remember, probably showing my age here, this would have been probably in the late noughties, going to a conference, and this was when kind of Facebook at the time was kind of seeing its big kind of growth trajectory, and there was this obsession in kind of brand land to grow your followers, hundreds, thousands type thing. And there was a table shown, which at the time was, for every 100 followers you have, how many will see, on average, a piece of your organic content. And I think at the time it was like 17, and people were shocked at just how low that number was. And I remember then getting the updated graph on that. I think it was like 2 years later, and it was down to 4%. And then very quickly, it became sub 2% for the average brand. And I think all those dynamics seem to always be true, which is kind of platform grows, organic is kind of the lever. It grows heavily with you. And then as the platform changes in terms of monetization, and also just sheer volume of content as people jump onto those platforms, reach gets harder and harder. Do you see, I'd just be interested, very macro, like how different do you see it, say, with a brand that's playing heavily in TikTok, which I presume you might still get, better organic reach than, say, a more mature platform like a Facebook or an Instagram, or is that just not true anymore? And it is, they're all kind of similar.
Yeah, I think in terms of pure organic reach, I think TikTok still is the one where, not that it's easy, but the easiest platform to get those, if you're just looking for some big numbers and some big views, then TikTok can still give you those. It's certainly not what it was, 12 to 18 months ago, where, you could almost be guaranteed a few thousand views on videos and potentially more, if you need to get something right. Again, I think more brands have realized that TikTok is pretty useful. I think TikTok's an interesting one because what I've seen is you can get a lot of views, but it's hard to translate those views even just into follows. So, you might get 50,000 views on a video and blow up and you pick up 10 followers from it. And so, while the views are there from a business perspective, it can be hard to kind of go, how do we then convert those views into followers and those followers into, website traffic or into sales or, actual conversions. So yeah, it's an interesting one. And I think, yeah, I'd imagine that TikTok will continue on that same trajectory we've seen for every other page, every other account, Instagram, Facebook, and by this time next year, the reach will be, will be slightly lower again. And yeah, continue on that kind of downward, not that it's a spiral, but downward trend.
Yeah, we see the same thing with TikTok in the agency as well, where you do often get incredible reach numbers. And if you're in the paid side of things, you can get quite cheap traffic, but kind of commercializing that is often kind of a bit different versus traffic from other channels. And then what about, I mean, you've touched on short form and reels. Maybe just for listeners that maybe not natively using social media themselves as much. I think like a lot of listeners would be probably heavy LinkedIn users and then would probably be quite divergent in terms of personal social media platforms. But we could just talk a little bit about short form and talk about, what reels are, how they work and how they've kind of changed the landscape for your Facebook and your YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah. So essentially what kind of happened and the way that I like to talk about it is TikTok came along. It lines up pretty much with the pandemic as well, where, a lot of people were all locked in at home, looking for things to do, looking for a distraction, looking for anything to do. TikTok came along. Obviously, it was around before then, but it really blew up, in that first year of pandemic. Facebook and Instagram looked at TikTok. They were like, holy crap, there's this, exploding new platform. Everyone is watching, short videos. And when we talk about short form videos, it can be from anywhere to, 5 to 30 to 90 seconds long. I think that kind of, 5 to 20 seconds is around that sweet spot that we see, but there's certainly a trend to keeping people on a video for longer now. And I think TikTok and Instagram are both recognizing that, they don't want people just watching like a 4-second clip anymore. They want to stick around a bit longer. So it's not as clear cut, especially this year. I think the importance is going to flip a little bit to slightly longer. When by longer, I mean maybe a minute.
And still reasonably short form.
Yeah, which is crazy when you think about it. But yeah, so what Instagram and Facebook did, with Meta, they saw that and they were like, holy crap, we need a slice of that pie. We need to get in on that. And so they, I think it was a pretty hasty launch of Instagram Reels. It wasn't on Facebook. Reels went on Facebook first, and Reels was, as these platforms can do pretty well, they take the best features from other platforms and repurpose it for their platform. And what I think Reels do differently, and the shift that's happened in social media is, when you go into the Reels tab on Instagram, you see content from people that you don't follow. And so it's a curated feed based on your viewing habit, things you've interacted with in the past, and basically what Instagram thinks you'll enjoy watching and thinks that you'll enjoy, seeing content from, because they recognize, hey, there's a whole bunch of content out there that we're just not seeing because, we've curated our feed with friends and family and our sports teams and, maybe a few brands, but there's all these other great stuff out there from comedians and creators and people that you're just not seeing. So we're going to show you that content. And so that kind of, I think, changed, and TikTok for me has changed the way that brands think about social media, or at least should think about social media, in that, it's now an entertainment platform, because if you can entertain people, then you can be shown up and seen by people that not just in your audience, but, a new audience as well, and kind of bring those people in by entertaining them. And so, TikTok labels themselves as an entertainment platform, not a social media platform. Like, it's not about your friends on there. It's about, going down that TikTok wormhole and just watching a bunch of cool videos that it thinks that you'll like. And Reels is very similar. So, yeah, I think as brands, if you're not playing in the Reels space, I think you're probably already pretty late, but you should be doing it, ASAP to jump on there. It's certainly not as easy to get some good numbers there as what it was, again, that all 18 months ago. But yeah, it's still a really, for me, it's exciting because you've never really had that on Instagram, outside of the Explore tab, which, I still feel like there's a lot of people that don't even know what that is, or even use it. So that discoverability element of Instagram that hasn't really been there, that gives us a chance to be seen by new people and grow. Yeah, that's pretty good. And
yeah, and I think it is. I was going to say it if you didn't. You kind of you used the words I was going to, which is the whole TikTok doesn't see itself as a social platform; it sees itself as an entertainment platform, and I think that is therefore a shift. I think that if you're an in-house marketer, you need to make that shift, which is it's different now. If we're going to play in TikTok and if we're going to play in short form video, you kind of almost need to change your own mindset, which is we have to come in and play in this new paradigm, which is about entertaining users as opposed to potentially coming in with our own purpose. I'd be really curious, Edwin, just at your experience. Like you spent, I think you're at 10 for, was it 5 years or something like that, working across a range of their different products and offerings. Senior social producer, you worked on The Voice Australia. And that's a huge amount of time, I guess, to be playing and testing and seeing what works and what doesn't. And also quite diverse shows, I think, working with from sport to entertainment, whatever else. Like, what are the things that you learned in that role and previous roles that you're now applying into B2C and B2B marketing for Australian businesses? I guess, how can we learn from your learning?
Yeah, so look, I think I was pretty lucky to have that experience and the jobs that I had. I'll always look back on my time, especially Channel 10, where we're a pretty small team. We had a lot of creative freedom as well. Like, I think there wasn't a lot of approvals or things that we had to kind of run up the chain, which was great because
Did you get in trouble for anything?
a couple of times.
Anything that you can talk about on the pod?
What did I get in trouble for? I remember, so there was this is a good one actually. I've forgotten about this until just now. So one of like the best things I did as part of my career highlight was I worked on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and I did 3 seasons of that and worked in Africa. So I was literally like in the middle of Africa for spent close to 6 months in Africa across those 3 years, which is unreal. But you have like a really tight team, work closely with the production side as well as the Channel 10 side over there. But on the Channel 10 side, there's only a handful of people that go over there, and I think it was the first year we were there, and we did like this just stupid video compilation of like people like burping and like heaving, almost like throwing up, in one of the trials that they do, and our video editor like cut it together to the like like that tune. So after that, it was like a vomit basically. And so we put that together and we're like, this is the funniest shit like we've ever seen. And basically went to our boss, like the head of the show that was in Africa, and we're like, we've made this, like, it's a bit on the edge in terms of like we posted, it's like that's hilarious, posted, and we posted it, and then got a call from back in Australia, because there's always that weird divide between like the African team and the like Sydney team. They're like, what the hell is this?
You've gone crazy. You've been locked up for 2 months.
This is so immature and like sorry, just like not what the show's about. It's a family show, and we're like a couple of people like dry heaving, and it is like comedy gold. And yeah, I remember that I remember being like very like quite worried about it and being like, I'm gonna be getting in trouble here. But then the big boss came over and was like, don't worry, we got your back. We thought it was great. That is what the show is about. It's silly and it's fun. And I think, yeah, going back to your kind of question, that I think just that, those things I spoke about around content, I think I really learned that from, 5, 6 years ago, where, you're working on these shows, big noisy shows, and the temptation was to say, hey, the show is on tonight. And that was always the directive. We're trying to get people to watch the show.
Mm.
And the ultimate goal is to get people to watch, 7:30 on Sunday, tune in and watch Celebrity and, Australian Survivor or whatever the show was. And, like it wasn't just me, like we're a great team there, but, our thinking always was, what, let's not just post a photo that says 7:30 tonight. Let's try and think of ways of, getting people to watch something, or to, post a funny, like a meme, or post something that gets people there and engaging and interested in the content. And we'll still have that message in there, but it won't be the focus. It'll be, the second line of copy, or, a little watermark in the corner. So people are still reminded of it. But what we worked out pretty quickly was, obviously you post a promotional image, people don't care. You post something that's fun, people care, and the engagement's massive. And then all of a sudden people are actually watching and sharing with their friends, and they're ultimately promoting the show for you, because you've got that, a line of caption, and then the second line says, I'm a celebrity, Channel 10. They're still getting that message, but it's just in a more kind of subtle way. And, I've try and use those learning ever since. And I think it's more relevant now than ever. And that, you need to be, ultimately as a brand, whatever brand that you're working for, like you want to promote what you're doing, but if you're promoting something directly and that's all you're doing is saying, hey, here's the product, here's where you can buy it, here's my services, come and do this, you're not going to have any success, because it's boring. And that's not what people use social media for. And like, it's so much more prevalent now, where, again, we know social media's turned more into an entertainment platform. And so I think just that idea of, entertaining first and then selling second is like that, probably that biggest lesson that I learned, because I saw, the reach numbers that we got on those massive pages, that have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of likes or follows on Instagram. And the moment you did something that was boring, people just wouldn't care, no matter how big your audience was. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And when you overlay it now with the algorithms overweighting the way that users are interacting with content, and potentially then seeding content to a whole bunch of people that have never been exposed to your brand before, if you are posting content that just doesn't have that interest or virality, then it just doesn't get seen anymore. And like, that's always kind of been true to a certain extent. But it's interesting, when you were telling the story about the, that post in Africa, would suspect that most listeners to the pod can kind of resonate with that, because I think in their context, it might not necessarily be someone vomiting and making silly noises, but it's the reality that I think often we as marketers know that in order to get traction socially, we need to put content out there that it ticks the boxes that you've just described. It's entertaining and gives value to the person that is seeing it. But the temptation is, I think, from C-suite, non-marketers, or people with certain kind of interest in an organization, it's kind of, do the post that talks about us and puts us forward, essentially the equivalent of the tune in at 7:30 p.m. to watch our show, which is no one's going to engage with that. No algorithm's going to seed it and start showing it to people, because it's just fundamentally not very interesting.
Yeah. And, like, don't get me wrong, it was a battle. Like, it was constant battles with, the different teams within the business to try and, almost like educate them around, while we're doing this, and the thinking behind it, that, because it is hard to say, if you post a promotional image, it's going to reach less people when they look at the numbers and go, well, we need 100,000 people of our Facebook followers to see this post. So let's post this, and then they know that it's on. And it's like, well, no, like maybe 2,000 of those might see it if the post sucks. So let's do something that gets 50,000 reach and actually, communicates that message. And, it certainly wasn't easy. And there was many battles, I think, that we lost, where we tried to, have a bit of fun, and they're like, no, you have to do this. And it's like, but I think that education piece is really important to get people across, the wider business, across what you're doing. And I think that was something that I definitely learned as well, across a couple of years that I was there, where, you can't jump in the deep end. And that was maybe pretty sure that was the first year that I was working on I'm a Celeb, and, did the dry head montage. I was like, maybe that was a bit too early. Like, maybe that could have been a year 2 thing. One, you built up a bit of trust. the C-suite, the big bosses, they understand what you're trying to do, and they know that the reason for that is this versus jumping in the deep end and they get scared off, and it becomes it becomes harder to do. But yeah, it that constant battle of, educating. And I think sometimes as well, like there were certainly times where you kind of go, we'll do the bad post, but we're going to do a fun post as well, and, tick kind of both boxes. And, I think sometimes that, even for me, like there was times I was like, this post is just terrible. It's awful. Like no one is going to care about it. But at the end of the day, like, it's not going to be the end of the world if you share something that maybe isn't quite as engaging or interesting as what we want, as long as we can follow it up with something that is a bit better and
Yeah.
more entertaining.
Can you talk a little bit about, like, I want to talk about ideation a little bit later, but what are the hallmarks of a good post? And we get lots of questions around, what's the optimal length of a post? What is there a structure, a format? Like, how do we try to captivate someone's attention early? I presume that's important. And then if you could talk a little bit about how it differs depending on placement in terms of channel, like is something that we're putting on LinkedIn different to what we're going to be putting on TikTok? Just in terms of the hallmarks of a good video post.
That's kind of like the million dollar question, isn't it? If you can get that right, then yeah, it's not be great. I think there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences between the platforms. I think LinkedIn obviously is probably the most different because the way that I think about it is people go there with a different mindset. Like you're going there with your kind of professional hat on, right? Like you're not bored at work going, I'll go have a scroll of LinkedIn and, watch a few fun videos. You're going there to maybe learn, to read a couple of good stories, to feel inspired. So I think in terms of the content type, it should be different to what you post on TikTok, but can be more, fun and irreverent and a bit more silly. And then I think that's your kind of spectrum. You've got LinkedIn on one side and you got TikTok on the other. Then I think next to TikTok, you've got Instagram with Reels and with content there. Then I think you've got Facebook that kind of varies because Facebook for some businesses is still really successful. For others, it is almost irrelevant because of just how low the reach is. But I think there's still some fun to be had on Facebook. I think that Facebook Reels in particular over the last kind of 6 months have gotten a lot better. They seem to have worked out the algorithm a bit more. There's a bit more of the cross sharing ability with Instagram, which I think is pretty important. So I do think that kind of Facebook Reels this year is kind of one to watch and one to experiment with if you haven't already. Because I think they've got the algorithm right and it's becoming a bit more, prominent and a bit easier to share from Instagram to Facebook.
Would you be advocating that clients post the same?
I knew you were going to ask that.
I knew I was always going to ask it, but I'm asking the questions that I get asked, Edwin. See,
I know, yeah, you're just flipping the script.
and I know the answer is going to be it depends, but I kind of
I tend to lean towards yes. Like I think a good TikTok video can work on Instagram, it can work on Facebook. I think LinkedIn's probably the one where you would go maybe not, depending on again what the content is. But if you're investing in making like a super entertaining 10 to 20 second video and it can work, if it's not based on a trending sound, if it's not like a super TikTok specific trend that's only on TikTok, I think, if it's someone talking to the camera, if it's something that's a bit fun that showcases your business, I think for me, I'm always up for trying to share across multiple platforms. I think sometimes we get too tied down in that's TikTok content, that's Instagram content, that's Facebook content. In a perfect world, maybe it's, we always have different edits and different versions to different platforms and, go a bit rougher and a bit sillier on TikTok and a bit tighter on Facebook. But, that's not always the case with budgets and team sizes, right? So for me, I'm always trying to find ways to double up the content and, you might, I think especially at first, like if you're new to the short form video game, chucking it kind of everywhere, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and just keeping on how things go is always a good way to go because, in 6 months time, you might have some learnings to then go, okay, this type of content really works on TikTok. It doesn't work on Instagram, but this type does. So let's, start to then shift off from there. So yeah, not a clear cut answer, but I
No,
think I'll say yes, you can.
yeah. And then are you making decision like how are you making the decision around which of the platforms to engage in? Like I suspect if you're a super hard nosed B2B business where you're trying to hit HR managers and that's the only kind of cohort of user that you're really trying to influence as a marketer, um, you kind of then leaning into LinkedIn and having kind of some support around the other channels. Like how would you approach something like that versus say, a straight B2C play, e-commerce, skincare range or something like that?
Yeah, I think it obviously it depends on the business and your target audience, who they are, and where we think they are. It's always an interesting one because you can make the argument that your HR reps are probably on TikTok as well, right? And I think it's probably naive to think that people are only on one platform. I think the latest numbers is like we have 7 social platforms as an average. So, it's not like we're just on one place, but
Yeah.
obviously in that example, it does make sense to lean in a bit more to LinkedIn and start firing off like corporate content on TikTok. So it's always, I think it really depends on business and it's going to change for everyone. And that's something that I always kind of talk about is, what works for one business is going to work for another. And I think you need to spend the time to work out, what works for you and your business and, work out where your audience is, work out what types of content they're watching, test some things, see if you're getting results on these different platforms. And, I think most businesses aren't going to have huge success on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. I don't think you're going to be, just nailing it on all 4 platforms. And so what I try and do is get to a place where you might be on those platforms, but it's like, our real focus is Instagram and TikTok because that's where we're getting the most results. And then,
Yeah.
we spend 10% of our time ticking away on Facebook and LinkedIn. So, yeah, but I think too often I think is, businesses think that they have to follow what someone else has done or like that that's the way to do things when, every audience is going to be different and, engage with them differently. So you kind of need to spend the time to work out for your business, like what actually works and, do the research, but also do the testing. And I think like I'm such a big fan of just testing content as well. Like, try some things, see what works, see what doesn't. Like you can get some great learnings from the numbers in on all these platforms and use those to your advantage and go, yeah, that was a good post. Let's try and do more of that. That topic or that theme or that post was a stinker. Like let's never do that one again.
Yeah. Does feel from looking at clients over the years that have succeeded in this space, it's done is better than perfect, like getting stuff into market, testing, learning, getting data. And I think naturally, which I think is broader than digital and broader, like it's essentially a marketing thing, which is I think you start to find there's just places where you play strongly and it resonates and just kind of keep working in that space, always having your test budget. TikTok starts to grow, put your foot in the water, see what works, what doesn't, maybe
Yeah.
start to really move heavily there. Or like we've tried over the years so heavily at Rocket to see if we can get Facebook and Insta going for us and to a lesser extent TikTok, and just never worked. I don't know if it's just the nature of who we are, if it's the nature of the type of clients that we attract. LinkedIn just is our place to play. We see Insta working really well for us just from a recruitment viewpoint. Like for us, it's just a different audience that we're playing, and that's okay. So we decide that we'll put our focus in terms of as it relates to social into LinkedIn. But I know there's other agencies out there that have done really awesome stuff with Instagram and TikTok, and it's worked for them. But I think you're right. Like I think just because it works for one of your competitors or kind of an adjacent brand doesn't mean it naturally will work for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. And I love what you said at the start there around, so I was kind of like, it doesn't have to be perfect as well. And I think that is something else that I think TikTok has brought to the social media landscape, in particular Instagram, where, I'm saying like, if your post is at 80%, you're trying to make it, 100%, you're trying to perfect the edit or make your photo look even better. Like I would rather just get some posts out, get some runs on the board than try and make it look perfect or get it, tweak your caption to make the right words or whatever that like fine tuning is. But I think off the back of TikTok, I think what what is actually resonating now is more like real and authentic style of
Mm.
content. Like it's a little bit more rough around the edges. It's not that, Instagram of 2020 where, everyone's, you kind of looking like, I think of influencers of 2020 where they're like, photoshopped, they're on holidays. We follow these people to be like envious of their lives, and everything that's put on Instagram is like it's the perfect version of
Yeah.
ourselves or of brands. Whereas now it's like, we want to know those same people, those same brands are just like us, that, and what can we learn from them? How can we relate to them? And I think that's again off the back of TikTok where, you open TikTok and most of the posts you see is just someone like talking to their phone, and it's that like super personalized, more rough in terms of like how it's shot, how it's edited, but the content is really strong because, it's personalized.
Yeah.
It feels like they're just talking to you. And I think that's another big change that I've seen, which I know not quite related to what we're talking about, but it just
No,
triggered like you say now. I'm like, I need
no, but I
to
think it is.
that one.
Yeah. And like, once again, looking at the clients of ours that succeed in this space, you kind of need to reset the rules of engagement because obviously things can go horribly wrong where someone managing social media posts something out on behalf of a brand and, we've seen examples of it, right? And so suddenly you've become the story and all kinds of damage has been done. But the reality is that to succeed in this space, you're going to have to compromise on a lot of the steps which you used to go through to have a TVC created and spend $1 million on it and the 6 months and then for it to go live. Like you often need to be able to move really quickly in this space to kind of to take advantage of a particular idea. Often you have to compromise on your style guide and brand guidelines because you just can't operate within TikTok if everything you pump out there is feeling like an ad. So
Yeah.
you've almost got to do this before you decide to engage in the channel. And I think that is something which, if you're not in these channels at the moment, or if you are and you're struggling, you almost have to go up the food chain and say, if we are to engage in this space, these are the compromises we're going to have to make. And the overall benefit is we'll be faster to market. This content is to a large extent kind of disposable, right? Most of this content is running for days, weeks, quickly falls off the radar. So I think it's hard, particularly for bigger kind of more conservative organizations that move slowly on things. If that's you, it's something you have to take into account because you're not going to be able to keep doing business the way you've done it and also succeed here. So you're almost best off not doing it at all. Or you get approvals to get around it.
No, I think that's such a good point. It's something that I often talk, and especially when I work with, larger brands, is I think they want to, have their brand guidelines. They want to have, really polished content. They want everything to look, to look like a TVC, to look like the YouTube ad, to look like their website. And for me, it's like, I actually think we should be thinking about social media as like a different property. It's like not the same. And it can't be the same as your website content. It can't be polished. It can't be, worded in the same way. It has to use a different language. The way that you shoot it has to be differently. Like, there's so many times when I'm working with brands and I'm like, let's just take the phone and a microphone on a shoot rather than, doing the bells and whistles because, that's going to look native to the platform. It's going to feel more real and you're going to get better results than, building a 30-second TVC and spending, a heap of money on it versus take the phone, you can grab 10 pieces of content.
Yeah, 100%. What are some brands that do a good job of that kind of tone down, I guess, to some extent, their social content or are happy to shoot on an iPhone or some pretty basic equipment that listeners could kind of point to if they need to help fight this battle internally?
Yes, I've got a couple. There was one that we spoke about earlier. I'm going to come back to them because there's another one that jumps in my head. For me, like the industry leader in Australia right now is Brittany Saunders on Instagram. So she has a couple of like fashion labels that are like a couple of like physical stores and then like a big online like retail store. And I've followed her for a while. I've even stalked her enough that I actually went back to her Instagram of like 2018 just to see like what she was posting. And in some of the workshops that I run, I use her as an example of showing how she went from, a classic model. You think of like Instagram of 2020, like that's her, pinky peachy tones, beaches, everything looks beautiful. It's that like envious style of content, and now you look at her content, it's shifted from image to video, but it's fun, it's rough around the edges, it's shot on a phone. You see like cardboard boxes in the background of their like warehouse. They're not on a set. It's just her walking around with a microphone. She brings in her stuff. It's super personal. It showcases her like she has like a big fun personality. I think that obviously helps. But she, when you think about Instagram in particular, I always think that like fashion is probably like the most precious in terms of like how they look and the style, the aesthetic of content. She goes the other way where it's like, I just want to make, show people around, have a bit of fun. She did a great little series on like educating people as well, where she was literally like in her warehouse, again, like terrible backdrop, but she was showing the price of shipping. So she was like, oh, I bet you didn't know this. Like when you get free shipping, it still costs us. So I'm going to show you how much the shipping costs. And she'll put like a real package on the scales and be like, oh, that's going to cost us $21.70.
Mhm.
And it was just like super interesting content, a great way of like bringing people into her brand. She very rarely talks about like, hey, we've got a sale on, come and buy this. And when she does, they made a fun video announcing a sale. I remember a couple of weeks ago where, it was just her talking to them, her staff, and being like, hey, what do you reckon? Should we have a sale? And she's like, no, we just did a sale. No, I want to anyway. And like, it's just such a refreshing way of like promoting content. So yeah, love her. It's weird. I talk about her a lot. And like, obviously I've never actually bought any of her like women's clothes. But she for me is like just someone that I love watching her content. There's another one, I actually work with these guys at the start of this year, which, it was cool to kind of help out a little bit. So they're called Phrase Skin. So there's a skincare range for guys. They're like two tradies that decided that they don't want to be tradies anymore, two young guys, and started like a skincare range. And what they did really well, I think, was just kind of documented their journey. And so they kind of brought people along on their journey. And so now everyone's kind of like cheering for their success. Like they, the first best I saw of theirs was they bought a billboard in Brisbane and like went to the billboard, filmed themselves at the front of the billboard being like, holy shit, like we're on a billboard. And like that kind of like way of thinking about content, it's those two front and center. It's them talking about their products, it's them explaining things, like they're pretty fun. They, it's not often that they do, again, that promotional side of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're probably two good examples.
I was thinking, ones that are worth looking at for different purposes is Duolingo, which was kind of the case study, the very kind of rise of TikTok, like seeing a brand that so quickly was okay putting aside all of its traditional guidelines around how it creates content and brand guidelines. They've now got 239 million likes, 11 million followers on TikTok. Just incredible. And just an example of if those guys had gone in there and just were trying to sell the app and sell language lessons, there's just no way, but they've actually come at it kind of customer first and put great content out there. HubSpot runs their own TikTok channel, and the content that they use on TikTok is very native feeling TikTok content, which is a good example of a B2B brand, which has gone, if we're going to play in this space, we need to do it in a way that is actually sympathetic towards the channel. So I think they're probably good ones for listeners to think of.
You haven't looked at Ryanair as well, like the budget airway, like I think the budget Europe airline, and they like, I don't know how they do some of the things they do, honestly. Like they basically just like wrote their audience.
It's savage.
They're like, we know how cheap we are, but like you're still gonna fly with us because we're cheap. And they play off that thinking in their content. And yeah, I'm obsessed with what they do and the way that they just like shit post basically, but everyone loves them. Actually, I think I saw that they're like social guy. I think he'd left. But I think he's speaking at a conference over here at State of Social this year. So I'm actually so interested to see like what he says about it and like how he kind of got that across the line. Because walking into like an exec room and being like, hey, we're just gonna troll our customers.
Probably not an approach that'll work for most listeners to
No, exactly. But yeah, I think there's so many brands out that are doing that, like a couple others. Even just I was looking today, not quite like my thing, but the artist Fred again. He was like massive at the moment. It kind of came out of nowhere. He just like built this crazy community of people that love him. And I saw that he literally announced his tours with like a screenshot of his notes app. And so he just like wrote on the iPhone notes app, like, I'm playing at these places in Australia, and just like posted that. And like each of those places have sold out. And for me, it kind of shows like, you don't need, an amazing like launch graphic if you've got that community of people. Obviously, he's like spent a bit of time building that up, but yeah, I love that. Yeah, a couple others. Drool by Dr. Chris Brown, like a pet care range. They, yeah, he's obviously uses like Dr. Chris Brown, pretty good looking dude, and dog. So like a little bit of like a cheat code for Instagram, but it's often like him literally like talking with the green screen and talking about like how to help your dog. That's one where he has like, if your dog has itchy paws, this is how you can avoid that happening. And so kind of like educational. And then at the end, it's like, this is our product that can help with that. And so it's a good way of selling things as well. So yeah, I think once you start, like for me at least, like once I started thinking about this more for brands, you start to see this content, like it'll be content that you naturally engage with, and you'll start to realize like that's the way of selling now. It's engaging first, it's selling second. That's what the best brands are doing, and you just won't actually see the other brands because their content won't be showing up on your feed.
That's it. It segues beautifully into the next area I wanted to cover, which is ideation. Like, how do you advocate that marketers come up with ideas if they themselves should be the ones doing it? But what are some tips, tricks to how to come up with ideas that are actually going to be interesting and work?
So I have a few things, like a few starting points. The first is, I'm obviously thinking about like entertainment first. I'm thinking about, the goals that we have as a business. Do we want website clicks? Do we want people to come into our store? Do we want, people to sign up for our course? Whatever those like business objectives are, and understanding that, but then understanding our why, but then also the audience's why. And I think that's what businesses don't do often is, we post things that we want our audience to see, but we don't think about like what our audience wants from us. And if we can post things that's interesting for our audience, solve a problem, make them laugh, make them feel something like that. And again, that's going to vary for every brand. Like not every brand should jump in and start trying to be funny and crack joke. But maybe you could jump in and lean on the education piece and kind of teach people some things, and say, hey, if you want to learn more, here's the course that I'm doing, or however that looks. So kind of thinking at it from an audience perspective. And then my kind of 3 pillars that I try and think about is entertain, educate, or inspire. And so if your content can do one of those 3 things, and again, that's not saying that every brand has to cover each of those, but they're a good starting point to go. If you're a bit of a lighter brand, let's try and entertain people. If you're someone that, wants to position yourself as an expert, let's educate people. If, you're a travel brand, let's inspire them to make the next trip, or like, obviously a lot of ways that you can go about things from there, but that's kind of my starting point. And then, from there, you can go a whole bunch of different ways. You can kind of get then into like the testing and learning and kind of, adopting and changing as you go. And I think that's probably a really important thing that, again, a lot of people don't do. Like the amount of brands that come to me, they're like, oh, Edwin, like we've got 100,000 followers. Like we've had them for 10 years, but in the last like 2 years, just like our engagement's dropped. And it's like, well, have you changed anything? Like, have you tried something? It's like, no, I mean, this is always work. Like, there's always work for us. And like, well, we need to change. We need to, try some short videos. We need to, add a bit of personality to move with the times. And I think a lot of brands are still stuck in that kind of pre-COVID, pre-TikTok era of thinking about content. So,
really interesting. And then what about just any, and I'm going to rapid fire here because we are getting kind of close to time.
Okay, I'll do 10-second answers.
Yeah, I love this. It's just nitty gritty, and the answer can be it doesn't matter as well. Video length,
5 to 20 seconds long.
camera quality,
doesn't matter if you have a good phone. So like, don't shoot on like an iPhone 6. If you've got a new iPhone, then it should, the camera quality is good enough and should be good enough.
using trending audio,
yes, are useful, but do it sparingly. Like your whole strategy shouldn't just be like jump on trending audios because probably not going to move the needle as much as what we want. But yeah, trending audio is good. I almost think of trending audio as like kind of hashtag. Like when people are watching audio that's trending, they'll see more videos using that trending audio. So they work in a similar way to hashtag. So if you think about it like that, yeah, not on every reel shouldn't just be jumping on
Yeah.
like a trending audio because then yeah.
Caption length?
Vary depending on how much good stuff you have to say.
And then, sorry, two more hashtags. You touched on
Um,
it.
hashtags, use hashtags, but don't, they're not as important as what they once were. They were like the real key to growth and discoverability on Instagram. Probably not so much on Facebook. They're not going to save a bad post. So they're going to help a few more people see a good post, but they're not going to make or break anything that you do. So
Okay.
don't stress about
Yeah. Um, should we be posting once a day, 5 times a day, once a week? Frequency. Yeah.
it.
See you laughing.
No, I reckon I could have predicted like half these questions, I reckon. Um, is the next question about when's the perfect time of day to post?
No, but it is now.
Okay. So what was that question?
Essentially, how often should you post?
Uh, this is again another one of the things that's going to change for every brand and every business. I think because posts are living a little bit longer now. Like often you'll see a post kind of circulate and a good one for a couple of days. So I don't feel like, and I'll never encourage a brand to post every day if they don't have the content to post every day. The consistency is actually the most important thing. So, how often can you post consistently great content that's actually engaging for your audience? If that's 3 or 4 times a week, then let's do that. If you can do that twice a day, then awesome. So again, it's going to change for each business, but um, yeah, I think a few years ago, you probably would have wanted to get to that like once a day mark where I don't think it's as important anymore.
Yeah, great answer. And then I actually wasn't going to ask day of week or time of day, but is there any advice you'd kind of give to people in that space?
I think it's similar to hashtags in that it used to be really important. And now I think it's just less important. That's worth keeping in mind. Like don't post at 3 a.m. on a Friday morning. Because we know that posts are living for longer. And so if you've got a really great piece of content that will work, it doesn't matter if you post it at 9 a.m. in the morning, 5 o'clock at night,
Yeah.
because ultimately that will still keep circulating and living for longer. It's one of those things I like to just keep in the back of my mind, find a sweet spot that works for you, maybe mid-hour or early evening or something. But yeah, don't overthink the room on that one.
Yeah, cool. That is awesome. There's so much good stuff in there. I think any marketer that is already in the space or is thinking about it or is struggling to get buy-in, I can't see how you're not getting lots and lots of practical takeaways. So thank you, Edwin. We finish every episode of the pod with one question. You can take as long or as little as you want to answer it. There's no 5-second restriction. What is your best piece of career advice for a in-house Australian marketer?
That is a great question. What is your best tip? Okay, I've got a good one, I think. I truly believe, I don't truly believe. I think it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think it's a little bit of like a half reality of the industry, but and I'll elaborate on that because I don't think it's as clear cut as just, know lots of people and you'll be sweet because obviously you've still got to be good at your job. But the amount of people that, I've met over the years, I'm a pretty friendly guy, I like to think. And, it wasn't like a strategic decision to like be nice to people and make friends. So then they'd come back to help me in a couple of years. But there's been a lot of examples of that where, just met people, I've had conversations, I've worked with them. Even now that I run my own business, there's my first boss, when I started off as a marketing assistant at Tennis Victoria in like 2011. I worked with her last year because she came to me and was still at Tennis Victoria and was like, I want some help with some of the tennis clubs down here. Can you do like a couple of workshops for us? And, we hadn't spoken in years, but she still kind of knew about me. So that kind of, just being a good person, keeping your networks open, you know, having a decent LinkedIn presence also helps. But just, yeah, being in touch with people and having that network, because you never know when they're going to be helpful and be able to, you know, come back and give you a job, give you some work, you know, share your work, talk to people about you. So I think that would be, yeah, that would be a big one. And probably further to like a little bit of an extension of that as well would be, like I'm a big believer in like sharing your work and like building a bit of a personal brand, and then they kind of go hand in hand where, you know, people, there's a lot of people that, yeah, I've worked with that still will like can still reach out to me. They're like, "Oh, I've been following you on Instagram. Looks like, you know, you're killing it at the moment." I'm like, did not even know that you were there or that you had even like followed me. But yeah, thanks. Like, oh, can you jump on this project and help out?
Mm.
That kind of personal brand stuff. Yeah, in particular on LinkedIn, where you're just kind of talking about the things that you're doing, helps kind of keep those people that you know aware of what you're doing. So then, you know, if an opportunity comes up, then you're actually front of mind.
That's
That's a beautiful one there. That was pretty.
That's a great answer. Yeah, and we actually did a pod on building your personal brand with Flo Brown, who is an expert in that space, and
Yeah.
some really good. I think if you, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it is something that all marketers, particularly young marketers, should be doing, consistently working on their own personal brand to sell internally and externally.
Yeah,
You know,
even I remember when I first started, I had a few people tell me like, you know, don't post about the work you're doing. Like, don't share the brands you're working on because it ruins the like, you know, the illusion that, you know, it's a brand account. It's not you running it. It's like they're the brand. So don't talk about that. And that kind of scarred me for a few years where I was like, I can't talk about these cool things that I'm doing, like the cool work I'm doing. And now I'm like, no, absolutely not. Like when I was at Channel 10, you know, when I would make a good post, I would share it on Twitter or on LinkedIn and be like, I did this because of this, and talk about my thinking, or be like, you know, just celebrate that I was, you know, happy with a certain type of content piece. And yeah, obviously Twitter's not really like, I don't know, a thing anymore. A little bit sad, but yeah, definitely that, like, yeah, the personal branding stuff. Yeah, you just never know what's going to come in handy.
yeah, couldn't agree more. Edwin, thank you so much for your time. Excellent having you on, and hopefully we'll have you on at another time.
Mate, anytime you want me back, I'm here. Thanks for having me on. It was a good chat. That time flew, didn't it? So yeah, appreciate you having me on, and yeah, we'll chat soon.
Nice one. Thank you.